Hi everybody, I hope you're doing marvellously well. A couple of months ago we demoed the Seventh Heaven Reverb plugin by Liquid Sonics. It's a wonderful plugin, and of course, I'm sure many of you know, it is based on the Decay M7, which is a standard. I hate that word, but we used it. If you go into pretty much any major mixer studio, if they have outboard hardware reverbs, the number one they have sitting in their rack, of course, is the Decay M7. It is a wonderful unit. And the Seventh Heaven is an emulation of that, and it is wonderful. Now, the Seventh Heaven Pro has a ton of additional features. There's a whole bunch of talking points about what they've done in the version 2 of this. But rather than sit there and list it for the next 10 minutes, let's start using it and see how the additional features they've added actually will benefit us. So I've got the Jonah Smith song here that we did live at Sunset Sound. This is entirely live vocal, live piano, live bass, live drums, and probably, and a shaker. And probably most importantly, zero auto-tuning. No tuning on the vocal at all. So it is a 100% live performance by incredible musicians playing together. It's John Button, of course, on bass, Blair Sinter on drums, and Jonah himself playing piano live and singing at the same time. I've used this before to demo reverbs because, you know, there's been other people that have made emulation of the rooms that this was recorded in particular. So here are the drums with zero rooms on them. Just wonderful, wonderful performance by Blair there. We've got the whole drum bus set up to have a reverb on it. So this is going to be a full mix of the drums. And I thought if I'm going to stick a really, really nice reverb on anything, I'm going to do it on a very beautifully recorded, well-performed drum performance by Mr. Blair Sinter. So here it is, the Seventh Heaven Professional. We've got a little triangle here, which we're going to click. And look at this, lo and behold. So this is like a lot more control than you get with the standard one. I see we've got some low cut, some master equalizer, which we can turn on and off. We've got presets, we've got the interface up here, CPU efficiency, set to 0 latency. I suppose if you've got multiple instances of this going on, you might want to change the CPU efficiency, but it would add some latency. But at the moment we're on 0 latency. This is a live recording. That's the way I want to be anyway. But of course there's advanced controls over here. Reflections with pre-delay and a pattern here that I can adjust. I've got a delay itself, roll off, frequency dependent decay time. I mean, you can really go to town on this. I'll probably explore a lot of the presets. There's now 236, where originally it was only 30. All right, so this is really quite useful to say the least. I've got the full drum mix. So let's have a quick look. I've got chambers, large chamber, medium chamber, large and dark, small and dark, kick chamber, snare chamber, vocal chamber, A&M chamber. Well, that's great, or as we like to call it in Los Angeles, the Muppets. It has a Kermit outside. It's owned by Jim Henson. A&M chamber B, old chamber, sunset chamber. All right, why am I doing this? Well, because these drums were recorded at sunset, so I want to see how close we can get it. So let's have a listen to the drums. No room mics, nothing, dry drums at Sunset Sound. As you would expect, absolutely superb playing from Blair Sinter. Here is 100% mix here. It's got a decay time of 2.15 seconds. It's 100% wet. Haven't touched any of the EQ. This would be as it's defaulted. Obviously, it's down at 9.8 dB, so it's a little bit quieter. Let's blend the two together. So to just refresh you, that is the full drum kit going into the reverb. That's not snare only, kick only, anything. It's a blend of every single mic. So it's emulating, you know, what a chamber would be like on the full kit. Great start, absolutely superb. So let's have a little bit more fun with it. So here we have Jonah's vocal. Dry as a bone. This is a 58, so nothing glamorous at all, so sure.
I never thought I would be caught by love so helplessly again.
Straight off the console. I may have had an 1176 on it. There's no EQ or anything on it. Flat as a bleeding pancake. Going in. The piano bleed you can hear is because he's playing live with the piano.
Again.
If we go to the piano, you can hear his vocal in the piano. That's the way it is. It's a live performance. Okay, so I am going to set up a vocal verb. Logically, you know, we could use exactly the same chamber. We could throw the whole mix through it so we had this sound of the whole band live in one room, which is one way of going, and might try that in a second. But on his vocal, I think I'm going to play with using a plate. Why the heck not? It's like classic. So I'm clicking through. Here we go. Got a bright plate here. Let's have a listen.
I never thought I would be caught by love so helplessly again. I can't see a reason why for rooting under falling skies again.
So we can turn the low cut on, which is set to 600 hertz at the moment.
I never thought I would be caught by love so helplessly again. I can't see a reason.
High cut at 10K. Let's throw in all the other instruments and see how that feels.
I never thought I would be caught by love so helplessly again. And I can't see a reason why for routine under falling.
This is a band recording live in the way they would have, you know, in 1970, whatever. I mean, we were recording live, obviously, up until yesterday, and it will always happen. But with a performance like this, where it's really super song-based, it's a singer, piano player, bass and drums, you know, we would have been sitting on a console and we would have had possibly 5 sends maximum on that console. And if you had 5 ways of getting reverbs and delays back when I started, which honestly wasn't that long ago, wasn't the 70s, the 90s, it would have been like, oh my God, you've got 5 multi-effects units. I would go in and mix records with, you know, a lexicon, maybe 480 or a 960 or at least a PCM 70 or something like that, maybe a PCM 42, maybe an Eventide, of course, you know, a handful of great things, SPX 90s. So the very fact now that we can access, you know, hundreds of different things simultaneously is crazy. But to keep the integrity of this recording, I think using this really great sounding plate and this wonderful chamber is really, really helping. Obviously, I'm not getting into all of the different details yet. Just wanted to hear purely how good this reverb sounds. So if I click on the plates one here, you'll see all of the different presets. Now, obviously, there's presets within the presets. So this is the headings for the presets. This is the groups, and then the subgroups come underneath. So the moment we're on plates 1, and I clicked through and I found bright plate. If I had gone to plates 2 here, for instance, these are the brighter settings. Just for schnitz and schniggles, let's go and find vocal shimmer. Okay, vocal shimmer. Vocal shimmer really reminds me of my PCM, because we have a setting, I think, on the lexicon called vocal shimmer.
I never thought I would be caught by love so helplessly again.
I don't have it here, I can't compare it, but geez, that really reminds me of it. What's interesting here is I chose a plate before and I turned on the low cut and the high cut. So it's 600 hertz, boom, everything cut below that, and then 10K. That's pretty typical for me, especially when you've got things like pianos and drums. You know, I want to hear the sizzle, the high end of the overheads, and the piano itself, of course. So I was thinking, I don't need that excessiveness in the vocals. In fact, to be honest, it drives me nuts if I'm hearing S's and T's wisping off and 10K and above. It's completely pointless. And also muddiness. I don't want to hear like real low mids and low end. It's just going to mess up the clarity of my mix. And what is interesting, if I press this settings thing here and I go down to the presets, you'll see that the master EQ and the ducker are highlighted, meaning the master EQ that we set on a different preset remains constant. If I turn that off, now when I change the preset, if I go back here, we've got plates 2, but let's go to a different one. Oh, it's the last one. So we'll go to alpha plate. You see that it turned off. So the low cut and high cut that I applied, that means if I want to set up different, really complicated EQs, I can decide to keep them on another preset. Because it might just be that I love the plate, but it's not quite the right plate, but it needs to have the low cut and the high cut done, which is what happened here. And I just want to apply that to all of the different settings. That's a really nifty idea. So you can keep the presets as they are, or you can keep your EQs added. Also the ducker, which is fantastic. Master EQ here, automatically enable when edited. Hold parameters on presets so I could hold the decay time. If I worked on the reverb, like on a snare going, for instance, and I wanted it to carry right up into the point of the downbeat and just shot, so it kind of bang, and it just deadened. Let's just say I find that exact time, and I apply some EQ where it's just bright enough, but I'm not sure if it's the right reverb. Is it the right reverb? Do I want to try a different whole one? I can choose to use the settings that I've got that will work in that section while auditioning other reverbs, which is a really, really smart idea, I've got to be honest. But then that's probably why it's called the Seventh Heaven Professional. All right, so I'm going back to the drums here for a second because we're going to try out some other aspects. Let's only listen to the kick for a second. So there's 2 kick elements here. Now, with this enabled, if I do the frequency cut here, huge. So we just got the attack of the kick in there, which means mixing just became infinitely easier because I don't have this low end build-up you don't want. Take it off. So that's a nifty little thing to do on the kick. With this very low frequency reverb, why don't we try something fun and just put it on the snare? So the moment we're only hearing the reverb on the snare. So I'm going to go and have a quick poke around here. Here, snare chamber, straight away. Okay, let's have a listen. I've also got a low frequency here. So if I wanted to, I could go in and boost all the way down to 20 hertz. So just for schnitz and schniggles, I'm going to go to about 100 and I'm going to boost it on the snare. So this is boosting the snare verb and putting some low frequency on there. Which is nice, but let's turn it off again and see what we can do using the very low frequency reverb. So here is, you see the VLF here. Let's try this. So you can hear it better. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to put both of these sends from the top and the bottom into pre-fade. Mute both of those. So it's still sending, but we're only hearing the verb. Off. It's adding a lot of lows on there, which is really tasteful. I wouldn't do that on a kick drum, unless I had a moment in the song and everything was muted and I wanted to have some bombastic low lows. I tend to keep low frequencies away from the kick drum because it can just add mud with long sustained ones. But let's have a quick comparison. So here's with the low frequency reverb. Which could be really good on vocal that just needed some more filling out. especially if it's like a solo acoustic or a mono piano and a vocal. This is the kind of detail that you want that is really, really straightforward to use. But anyway, I'm going to play this and then I'm going to turn it off and I'm going to enact our massive boost at 100 hertz and see which is better. A little bit boxy. Maybe bring the Q up a little bit, bring the gain down a bit. Fly in the snare. Swap. In this instance, I'm pretty hard pushed. The VLF reverb actually sounds more natural. And to me, that's probably because it's going very, very low, hence very, very, very low frequency reverb, and boosting like this. So if you're boosting super behind the snare, it's going to bring a really gentle curve. I find that if I'm boosting close to the actual low frequency of the snare, you get that kind of artificial bump, and it tends to sound like a little bit EQ'd. So it's kind of a catch-22. The effect is more immediate when coming in here, but I like it. I suppose the other thing we could do is lower the frequency on it. Now put the low frequency reverb up to maximum. Still prefer that. So the very low frequency reverb works. It's more natural sounding. So we just went over to the advanced controls here. Now this low frequency dependent decay time is pretty special. I haven't heard it yet. So let's see what it does. But if I got the multiplier at ×1 on both low and high frequencies, it's not going to do anything. But let's try something. It could be that we can get the decay time on the snare to have less low end in it as it goes on, which might be really, really useful on drums in particular, like kicks and snares. So you can have reverb on your kick, but instead of it going whoosh and just having this low end just going on forever and just turning into mush and no definition, I could decrease it so it has an initial thump of low end. So we'll try it on the snare first, then we'll try it on the kick. But then actually reduce the length of the decay just on the low end, so we don't get the wash. All right, let's try on the snare first, because we're here on the snare. So I'm going to go to, let's go to like 200, which is a nice kind of 200 and below on a snare is a lot of body. I know people boost 100, 150, some people boost 220 on a Neve. So I'm going to go 200, and I'm going to reduce it. So first of all, I'm going to do what we did before, which is just turn off the live snare itself, so you're just hearing the verb. First of all, let's multiply it to see how it increases it. Okay, you can hear that. Whoa. In the right instance, that could be awesome. What a freaking great idea. So now we're hearing a lot of additional low end. Smart, really smart. Let's do the opposite. So now 200 and below is at about half of the decay time here. Really smart idea. So my dumb mathematics, and it's okay for me to be wrong because I'm dumb, it says the decay time is at 1.2 seconds. Yeah, the decay time of the whole reverb. But what we've done here is we've reduced it on 200 hertz and below. So now we could have potentially 0.6 of a second. Meaning I could have my kick drum, or in this instance, my snare low end be there, not be removed. So I boost it like crazy on the very low frequency reverb here, but I'm controlling it to only last a short amount of time. So I'm actually going to boost the low frequency reverb to maximum. I'll exaggerate it for effect. So now it's 3.3 times longer than the decay time. Now it's still there, but it's 0.4, so it's 1/3, yeah, basically 0.4, so let's go to half, so it's easier mathematics for my poor brain. So now it's about 0.6 of a second. So it's adding some low-end weight that we put in, but it's not lasting as long, so I want to hear that in the full drums. So the only reverb we have on the drums is the snare reverb with the additional boost of very low frequencies on the snare to give it a bit of weight, but then reduced to half the decay time. So you're going to have high-end kind of glistering, shimmering on the snare, but for longer, twice as long as the low end. Sounds awesome. This is just too much fun. You can really get in here and make this work well. So I'm going to be lazy and quick, and I'm duplicating the snare verb. The reason why I'm doing that is because I want to use a lot of the same settings. So I'm going to call this kick verb, because that's what I'm going to use. So I've got the same seventh heaven coming up. So now we're sending equally from two microphones. We've got the AKG D112 on the inside and the FET 47 on the outside, both equally being sent to the kick verb. I've got tons and tons of low frequency reverb boosted. It's going to be completely excessive. I have not done anything here on the advanced controls. It's set to 1 times the multipliers. So we should have too much low end in our reverb. Reduce that. 70% of the decay time. Even shorter. That's with the kick drum. So what I'm going to do now is set this to pre-fade. This is just the reverb. Let's turn the multiplier back to 1. So it's got all the weight now, but it's now significantly shorter. So you might ask, well, why can't you just do that anyway? Well, remember what I've done is I've got all of the attack of the kick drum, all of that high mid stuff. It's got a full 1.2 seconds worth of decay time, but 200 hertz and below only has 0.25. So at 1, this is what we got. Lot of low end, 800 hertz fit. Keep reducing it. It's a fantastic idea. Really, really smart idea. Throw into the full drum kit. Now we've got the snare doing it. We've got the rest of the drums. We've got the snare controlled, still has the weight there, but shorter and really, really short on the kick, maybe even shorter. Let's listen to the full drum kit now. You know, I know it's called Produce Like a Pro, and I hate the word professional, but that does sound really, really nice because we've got that. We've still got the verb and everything coming alive on everything. We've still got it on the kick. We've still got it on the snare. We've got the weight of those two things, but we have controlled the decay time on the low end while allowing the mids and everything to breathe. Really, really nice. No verb. Add the verb. So we can do the same thing with the toms. We can add all that excessive low end that we want that's totally over the top, and then decrease the decay time on the toms only in the verb, and we'll get that weight in there as well. Absolutely superb. Great, great feature. So we've gone back to the vocal. I'm going to look at this roll-off section here between the reflections and the reverb, and then also this early late control here. So for instance, if I just play where we've defaulted to on plate 2, the alpha plate, let's have a listen.
I never thought I would be caught by love so helplessly again.
Now, I'm going to play it again, and I'm going to adjust to maximum, early, and late. Now, if we go early, you're only going to hear the early reflections, which is, I think, of a dumb way of explaining it. We're in a large room, like a large rectangular room, vocals down here, microphones there. My dumb way of thinking about this is all the way around the vocal, and this corner of the back of the room is going to be my early reflections, things that are like immediately bouncing off. And then the reverb, let's just say we mic the back of the room so you hear more of the decay of it. So to prove this, even though this is a really dumb way of describing it, but it's an easy way to think about it, I'm going to go from maximum early.
I never thought that I would be caught by love so helpless
to maximum late. If we set that somewhere in the middle, or roughly where it was, just tilting towards the late, we can adjust how you hear that. So if I go all the way to the early, it's going to be this reflections here. So at the moment it's set to 10K. What about if we bring it down so it gets darker?
I never thought that I would be caught by love so helplessly again.
Even more?
Again. And I can't see the reason why for routine under falling skies again.
It's dark.
Again. I never thought that
Okay,
I would
let's go the other way. So I can decide whether I want those early reflections to be really, really super fat, or whether I want them to only, or to have more high end on it, and then blend between the two. So I've got the reverb there rolled off, so if I move back.
Again, I never thought I would be caught by love.
So I've got the decay of the reverb, but it's dark.
I never thought that I would be caught by love so helplessly.
I can go the other way, make it really bright. So it's full. But the reflections I can make super dark. Move towards them. That's really tasty. So I've got 4K and below on the reflections, and then I've got full bright on the reverb. It kind of gives me this illusion of miking a hallway, you know, a long way away that's super bright, a tiled room or something like that, miking a tiled room that's coming in and getting all the high frequencies bouncing around, and then I've got this kind of like very close, warmer sound around the vocal.
I never thought I would be caught by love so helplessly.
Drop the vocal in.
Again. And I can't see a reason why for routine under falling skies again. Again. I I never thought that I would be caught by love so helplessly again. I never thought that I would be caught by love.
I love this kind of control over reverbs. This is awesome. What we've been able to do with the drums and now the vocals.
I never thought that I would be caught by love so helplessly again. And I can't see a reason why for routine under falling skies again. I never thought that I would be caught by love so helplessly again.
Who would have thunk that so much detail in reverbs can really shape your mix so much? And so many of us, myself included, are so used to opening up a reverb and auditioning like 5 different things and going, yeah, that works. Maybe putting a bit of EQ on it. But here we can use different parts of the EQ. We can control the sustain, the decay of certain frequencies within the reverb. We can control the EQ differences between the early reflections and the later reflections. So we've got a different song up now, and we've got a snare sound, which is not particularly good, quite frankly, and it's a gated top with a snare bottom. But the reason why we chose it is because it's very short, and we're going to demonstrate here this reflection section here where it says pattern. Now, pattern is moving between a small room and a large room. And as our friend Nick described, this is something that was sort of akin to a lexicons, and of course something that the M7 would have, and it gives you a lot of control. So here on 0, for instance, and you're only going to hear the effect here on 0, you're hearing quite short early reflections, a small room, and as I increase it, the room will get larger, and almost where it becomes a flam. Well, actually a flam. Have a listen. There, it's going to make the snare feel pretty large. So I'm going to put in the kind of crappy snare sound that we have. So this is the organic snare back in, the natural snare. Mute it. So just a short boom snare. Kind of cool. So that is, now I'm on maximum early here so we can hear it. If I move this towards the late, blending what we just worked on. Now mute. Pretty remarkable what it's doing. So we're taking our pretty average sounding snare and giving it a lot of personality. We're putting it in a larger room. Pretty miraculous what reverb will do. Let's throw in the whole kit now. Take the reverb out. You hear there's a snare sample in there, a ringy snare sample. Take it off. Without the ringy snare sample. No verb. Pretty amazing what it's doing. Now we'll add our ringy snare sample. All together, it's giving us a really massive sound, with or without the sample. So that's a really cool control. So we're going to try the pattern control now on the vocal, pushing towards the early reflections as opposed to the later ones. So let's have a listen. It's on 0, and I'm going to move it to 31, the maximum, and you'll hear the difference.
I can be your undercover lover. I can be whatever gets you through. I can be your undercover lover. I can be whatever gets you through. I can be your undercover lover. I can be whatever gets you through. I can be your undercover lover. I can be whatever gets you through.
Nice.
I can be your undercover lover. I can be.
So once again, it's controlling the reflections. So you've got what sounds like very small, very tight reflections going up to much larger reflections, almost adding like a flamming effect. But it's not just the time, it's also the length. So there's more to it. And frankly, just mess around with it and make it sound good. It's a great little extra bit of detail.
I can be your undercover lover. I can be whatever gets you through.
Love this level of detail. I keep saying that, but I really do. I'm going to bring in some of the late reverb and let's see what we got.
I can be your undercover lover. I can be whatever gets you through. I can be your undercover lover. I can be whatever gets you through. I can be your undercover lover. I can be whatever gets you through. I can be your undercover lover.
Fantastic. This is the kind of detail that you can get with a real Bricasti M7 that's now being given to you inside of this plugin. Pretty remarkable. And I love this kind of detail, to be honest. I'm so used to, as I was saying earlier, just kind of opening up and choosing a reverb and going, that's cool, maybe adding some EQ. I like to EQ it independently and sometimes compressing and, of course, ducking. So let's talk about the ducking function now. So while we're on the vocal, let's hear what the ducker will do. So we could go absolutely nuts on the reverb, but only have it bloom at the end of every single phrase. So let's take this last phrase here and give it a little bit of leeway. So here's the phrase.
And if you leave before the morning.
So how about we do, and if you leave before the morning, and have that reverb really come up quite dramatically by, first of all, smashing the reverb in volume, but also making sure that it's ducking in between. So let's go over the top.
And if you leave before the morning. And if you leave before the morning.
There you go.
And if you leave before the morning.
So it's pretty dramatic, but it's dramatic on everything. So let's introduce some ducking. For those of you who don't know what ducking is, think of, depending how old you are, early radio stations you might have heard as a little kid. And they would always do this thing where you had, like I remember going on holiday and being in Portugal about 1 million years ago. And they had the local radio station and it was like playing like a early 90s dance track. And every time the DJ spoke, the track just went like this. It was kind of, and just, it was so, naive, but also kind of cool. But we won't do quite as dramatic as that, but we will use it so that you give the illusion there's always verb there. There will always be verbal around the vocal, but it will bloom after the singer stops singing, or more importantly, come up as the singer is decay on the end of the vocal. So it's really kind of nice on long decayed notes because it keeps the energy of the vocal there. Because imagine the end of that morning, as the morning fades out, the reverb's coming up and it just keeps the presence of the vocal there the whole time. Okay, so let's go to the darker control. Click on that. Got a threshold control here. Let's bring it down dramatically.
And if you leave before the morning. And if you leave before the morning.
Now it's growing, but it's not as dramatic and frankly not as quick as I want it to do. So now we're going to play with the release time and shorten the release time.
And if you leave before the morning.
There you go.
And if you leave before the morning. 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 And if you leave before the morning.
I love what this pattern control's doing, because it's making me feel like I've got like a slap delay going on inside of the reverb, which often I do. I put a slap delay and put the reverb afterwards, but it's doing it all for me.
And if you leave before the morning, and if you leave before the morning, and if you leave before the morning.
Absolutely superb. And of course, like, you know, because ducking, of course, is compression, which often I do. I'll take a reverb and I'll put a compressor going into it. So I'm actually reducing the signal going into the reverb. That can be quite natural. Or often I'll put the compressor after the reverb, and then that way it's the whole verb. I can make the verb as big as I like. Either way, both work great. What I like about this, of course, is I've got a ratio control here. So I'm treating it, those first three here, well, the trim as well, it's just a compressor. I'm using it like a compressor. So if you have any basic knowledge of compression, you can make this work. And if you don't have any basic knowledge, just tweak it until it sounds good, which is what most people do anyway.
And if you leave before the morning, and if you leave before the morning.
Superb. So pretty awesome. If you are into tweaking your reverb, this is the plugin for you. And of course, based on one of the best reverb units ever made, like we talked about at the beginning, the Bricasti M7 is every major mixer's favorite reverb. Take of that what you will, but it is a phenomenal reverb. And the ability now to tweak it, I feel like I'm controlling a piece of hardware. These aren't just IRs that have been taken from famous units. This gives me the same ability as I would with the hardware. And one last thing I've got to mention, we did touch on it briefly, is they have designed this for every single format. So if you're mixing in immersive, whether it be Atmos or Sony or whatever you want, or just good old-fashioned surround. When would anybody ever call surround old-fashioned? I suppose now it is. Whatever format you're mixing in, it's got you covered. I've shown you how I've been using it. I've had a great time with it. But most importantly, you have a 14-day free demo to try it out yourself, which I highly, highly recommend. With all of the plugins we demo, we absolutely recommend that you demo them for yourself. I'm happy to take you through my voyage of discovery and things that I love about it, but demo it for yourself and see what you think. I think it's a fantastic plugin. I've loved all kinds of different things over the years, sometimes for the ease of use, sometimes there's plugins that have incredible creativity, but this to me is a plugin after an incredible piece of hardware, and operates and thinks in the same way that mixers do when it comes to using hardware. So superb work, but you don't have to take my word for it, because you can download it and demo it for free. There will be a link down below for that. Thanks everyone. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, adios. If you already use it, let us know what you think of it. And if there's any other plugins on the market you want us to do a deep dive into, let us know. We'd love to do them. Thanks everyone. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, adios, goodbye, ciao.